Welcome to the Genealogy Gems podcast, providing quick and innovative ways to make the absolute most out of your research time and creative ideas for sharing and displaying your family history. I'm your host, Lisa Louise Cook. Hello and welcome to episode number 88 of the Genealogy Gems podcast. Glad to have you aboard, and I gotta tell you, there is so much news going on in the world of genealogy. This entire episode could just be a genealogy newscast. Okay, here, come on, let's try it. The United Kingdom family history website findmypast.co.uk has today expanded its collection of British military records with the release of the Royal Marine Medal Roll 1914 to 1920. The record set provides a listing of all Royal Marines who received medals for their service in World War I, including those awarded the 1914 Star, the clasp to the 1914 Star, the 1914 to 15 Star, the British War Medal, and the Victory Medal. Okay, I don't think the 6 o'clock evening news is my style, so anyway, I am very happy to tell you that those new records at Find My Past contain records of over 75,000 officers, NCOs, and other ranks. And of course, the Royal Marine Medal Roll 1914-1920 comprises both transcripts and the images of the original World War I campaign medal rolls for the Royal Marines. And aside from the medals awarded, the records detail the Marine's name, rank, service branch, service number, and also a description of where or to whom the medal was issued. And in addition to this, many of the transcripts contain extra service details, which is always nice, for the Royal Marines, often highlighting those that died of wounds or were killed in action during World War I. And these details are available online for the very first time. Also announced by Find My Past is their takeover of worldvitalrecords.com.au. The Australian online service will be relaunched as findmypast.com.au. It's going to initially provide subscription access to both Australian and New Zealand content, and the plan is then to fully integrate both content and features from the findmypast.co.uk website as soon as possible. Family Link, who owns World Vital Records Australia, Find My Past, and its partners Gould Genealogy and History made the announcement jointly at the recent National Genealogical Society conference in Salt Lake City. According to Yvette Arts, Director of Partner Relations at Family Link, who's been here on the show with us in the past, she says that FamilyLink.com will continue to feature Australasian content on its WorldVitalRecords.com website. Subscribers to the existing worldvitalrecords.com.au site are going to be able to access the records on the new findmypast.com.au as soon as it launches. And those customers with the World Package or the Australasia Plus will additionally be able to access the records on Family Link's worldvitalrecords.com world site. And like I said, there's more news over at another big player in the online genealogy records game. Ancestry.com announces new online versions of the Red Book and the Source Online. Those versions of the Source, a guidebook to American genealogy, and the Red Book, American state, county, and town sources, are now available online. These two books are really standard reference books for thousands of genealogists. And the reason they're online is because Ancestry.com recently sold its public publishing business to Turner Publishing, but they've retained the rights to publish some of their previous held materials. So what does that mean for you? Well, Ancestry.com offers now online versions of both of these books in a wiki format, absolutely free. The entire books will be online, and of course the big benefit is that they are now fully searchable. This means that you can search those incredibly large and comprehensive books by keywords and phrases that you're looking for just as quick as you can say Google. So let's talk a minute about how a wiki is different than just a digitized version of a book on a site like Google Books. According to the most famous wiki on the web, which is Wikipedia, a wiki is a website that allows the easy creation and editing of any number of interlinked web pages via a web browser using a simplified markup language or a WYSIWYG text editor. Yikes, that doesn't sound very easy and user-friendly, does it? Okay, well, the bottom line is that a wiki is a website which users can contribute to. Sort of kind of like an online brain trust. And various topics that might be referred to in an article, those get linked to the wiki page for that topic so that you can learn more about it if you want to. Wikis really bring to life how interconnected information is online. If you're learning about immigration, for example, on a wiki, and they refer to, say, passenger lists, and you're new to genealogy and you're not exactly sure what a passenger list is, well, you can click on the linked word passenger list, and it will take you to the wiki page that explains them. And while users can contribute information and add to existing wiki topics, those updates, they do go through a review process before they become visible on the site, just to ensure that it's correct and it's well documented. As a genealogist, you'll enjoy the source citations that you're going to find in the wiki. They're so critical to wikis. You got to feel confident that there's something to back up what you're reading online, right? So those source citations are really nice. Now, the Ancestry Wiki is currently still in beta mode, which means it's being fine-tuned. It's not the official, launched version, and all the bells and whistles aren't up and running yet. But that beta version of the Ancestry.com wiki is available now. You can check it out free at Ancestry.com/wiki. You can't register for a username as of this recording yet, but you can add to it and edit your postings, and those will be tied to your computer's IP address. And by the way, this is a beta and brand new because when I did a search on the keyword immigration, no page titles matched. In fact, it doesn't look like the search for page titles even is working properly because on all the searches I did, the first results would say, oh, there's no page titles that have that word or phrase. Even the word genealogy or the phrase red book, for goodness sakes. But if you scroll down further, you do find links to pages that do include those words and phrases. So again, it's new and it's pretty rough, but you might just find what you're looking for. And I do think that it has a lot of potential down the road to be really, really useful. Though I have to say the Family Search Wiki is really ahead of the game when it comes to wikis. You can find the Family Search Wiki at wiki.familysearch.org. And currently, it has over 36,000 articles that you can search from. Also from Ancestry, they just announced they're planning to release a Mac version of Family Tree Maker later this year. The folks at Ancestry say that the Mac version of Family Tree Maker is going to be built on the functionality of Family Tree Maker 2010, which is currently just for the PC, and constructed from the bottom up to take full advantage of the Mac platform in terms of technology and user experience. It's going to be a big job. It'll be interesting to see if they do get it out later this year, and it'll be interesting to see if it truly does function at the same level that the PC version does. One of my listeners had written in this week and mentioned that she was trying to decide about that, and I was telling her, I use a certain video editing program, and they came out with a Mac version, and I was all excited because I could load it onto my Mac and I could have it on both computers. Well, the Mac version is probably, I would say, it's like a stripped down version. It's about 50% of the capability of the original version that was for PC. The other thing is, because it's on a Mac platform, it works completely differently in terms of user interface. So it's really challenging because you've learned the program one way, and then how you do everything is completely different in the Mac version. So it's not a simple thing to announce that they're going to put this on the Mac, and it'll be, we'll just have to keep our eyes and ears open and see how it looks when it comes out. And over at Family Search, they have announced over 300 million new names added online. Big news. There were over 150 new collections added or enhanced this week at familysearch.org. Their volunteers have indexed over 120 million records, which comes to about 300 million new names. The records can be found at Family Search's Record Search Pilot. You can go to familysearch.org, click Search Records, and then click Record Search Pilot. Or you can go to beta.familysearch.org. And if you would like to help them out and volunteer to do some indexing, they're always looking for volunteers, head over to familysearchindexing.org. Well, here at Genealogy Gems, we have some news too. Lots of new things going on. First of all, by now you've probably received the July 2010 issue of Family Tree magazine in your mailbox if you have a subscription, and probably noticed it was quite a bit different. The cover was quite a bit different this time. A fun little cartoon of Sherlock Holmes was on the front cover, and that's because my article, Undercover Genealogy, is the cover story. I gotta tell you, as a mom of 3 and a grandmother of 1 who has frankly always been a bit of a magazine junkie, I can tell you that it's pretty amazing for me to see my article featured on my favorite magazine. I've written some shorter articles in the past for Family Tree, and of course, I host the Family Tree Magazine podcast, but this full-length feature article is pretty darn cool. You know it's a big deal when even my husband sat down and he read the article, the whole thing. And I can't think of a topic really that I would rather have for my first cover article than this one, which teaches you how to be a family history detective. You'll find 10 investigative strategies for locating living relatives and discovering key family history clues. It's think outside the box time, and these are tactics that have really paid off for me, which is why I included them. It's interesting that when my husband Bill read the article, his first response was, wow, there's a ton of really usable stuff in there. He said he gets really tired of reading fluff articles that don't actually tell you how to do things for yourself, and that's certainly not the case with this one, which was kind of cool. That's what I was striving for. And really that's because of the editor, Allison Stacy, over at Family Tree Magazine. She and I definitely have like minds when it comes to usable content. And that's why I love the magazine. I've read it practically since it was launched 10 years ago. It's not just fluffy, feel-good articles about family history, but real, get your hands dirty and dig up your ancestors. Okay, pardon the pun. If you're not a subscriber yet, you're really missing out on some great stuff. Head over to the show notes, and I'll have a link there for you where you can subscribe through Amazon. And of course, when you buy stuff through Amazon, it helps keep this free podcast going, which we really appreciate. And you certainly don't want to pay $5.99, the cover, which is the cover price at the bookstore, on individual issues. It's way cheaper if you just subscribe through Amazon. So I'll have that for you in the show notes. And in fact, if you enjoy the article, I think you would really love the class that I'm going to be teaching for Family Tree University. It's called Reverse Genealogy, which includes some of the techniques that you would use to find living relatives, as well as a ton of other innovative techniques for searching forward. Now, we usually search backwards in genealogy. Well, again, sometimes you just got to step outside the box, particularly when you're working with brick walls. Like I always say, if you drove your car down an alley and you hit a dead end at a brick wall, what would you do? Well, you'd throw it into reverse, of course. And that's exactly what we do in this class. It's called Reverse Genealogy, Working Forward to Break Down Brick Walls. And it's starting up here quick. It's going to be May 10th of 2010. I'll have a link for you in the show notes where you can register. It's been so much fun to see several of you listeners in my current class that I'm teaching, which is Google Tools for Genealogy. We just finished up lesson 1 and are heading into lesson 2 this week. I love it because I get to be interactive with the students on a daily basis. We chat throughout the week about the lessons, questions, and the gems that they're finding, and it is a bunch of fun. So I will have a link to the new class, Reverse Genealogy, in the show notes. And also, more news here at Genealogy Gems. I have joined the team at the Visit Salt Lake City official website as their genealogy blogger. What a great website. If you are planning a trip to Salt Lake City, this is the site to go to. They've got it all. Where to stay, where to eat, what to see, events, nearby attractions, everything. I mean, who knew there was so much to do in the Salt Lake City area? This is great for genealogists. It might be easier, to get the family to make the trip with you so that you can hit the family history library if you could line up some other really fun and interesting things for them to do while you're there. So I'll have a link for you in the show notes to my very first post over at the Visit Salt Lake City website. And while you're there, if you click that little orange RSS feed button there at the top of the blog post, you can subscribe in a blog reader or add the blog column to your iGoogle homepage. And that's really the easiest way to follow the blog. Next, I want to give a shout out to the Mount Diablo Genealogical Society. They sent me a copy of their April 2010 newsletter, and holy cow, there was a full-page article all about genealogy gems. Very cool. Thank you, John, and everybody over at the Mount Diablo Genealogical Society in Walnut Creek, California. A great unexpected surprise, and I really, really appreciate you sharing genealogy gems with your readers. I love that we can be a free resource to your members, so thank you very, very much. And finally, a big thank you to alert listener Jonathan Del Calo for alerting me that my book, Genealogy Gems, Ultimate Research Strategies, is now officially in the iBookstore and ready for download to your iPad. As I mentioned on a previous episode, my publisher had alerted me that they had selected my book for the first wave of releases to be published in the iBookstore, which was very cool. But they said it was going to take like 8 weeks or longer. So I am so glad that they underpromised and over-delivered, because it's just been a couple of weeks. And Jonathan let me know that he saw it there. It's already ready to go. You can download it from the iBookstore, and I will have a link that will take you directly to the book's listing in the show notes for this episode to the iBookstore. Boy, it makes me want to get an iPad. I didn't get one yet. I'm still using my iTouch, which I love. And of course, we have the Genealogy Gems podcast app that you can put on your iTouch or your iPhone or the iPad. So I don't know. I may have to have one just so I can see it. My daughter said she saw one in person and it was very, very cool. So I don't know. Might have to get one for myself. Maybe Santa Claus will bring me one this Christmas, or I don't know. Mother's Day is coming up. That's the news. I told you there was a lot of news. And let me just remind you right now, because sometimes I do get the question on email. As I mentioned, I'm going to have links for everything that I was talking about in the show notes for this episode. There's a couple of hopefully quick and easy ways for you to access the show notes. If you're a Genealogy Gems toolbar user, the quick and easiest way to get there is over on the far left-hand side of the toolbar. Just click the little picture of the Genealogy Gems family. That takes you to the homepage, genealogygems.tv. In the left-hand column, click Podcast, and then you've got listings, and they're all by episode number. So you just navigate your way. In this case, for episode 88, I would click on Season 5, episodes 81 through 100, scroll down, and click on Listen and Show Notes for episode 88. If you are an iGoogle user and you have a Genealogy Gems podcast gadget on your iGoogle page, if you expand the entire gadget, click that little button in the far right-hand corner at the top of the gadget. It'll expand it and you can access show notes that way as well. So when you get to the show notes, you'll see everything listed there, including photographs, videos, things we've talked about. There'll be links to all of those websites and things that we've discussed. And of course, as I mentioned, when you use the links that take you to places like Amazon and iTunes and that type of thing, if you make any purchases, then all of those are credited back to the podcast, which helps us keep the free podcast up and running for a long time to come. So thank you very, very much. Okay, well, that is the news. Again, as I say from here, now next we're going to head over to the mailbox. Roots Magic 4 has been completely rewritten and is now even more powerful and makes building your family tree easier than ever. I love it. With Roots Magic, you can add unlimited facts, Find anyone in your database with lightning speed with Roots Magic Explorer. Quickly and easily create perfectly formatted sources with the Roots Magic Source Wizard. Create customized reports, and best of all, you can now take Roots Magic wherever your research takes you with the Roots Magic to Go, which lets you run Roots Magic directly off your flash drive. And Roots Magic makes it a snap to share your family history. Publish a book, create stunning wall charts, shareable CDs, even generate websites automatically from your data. To download your risk-free trial of Roots Magic 4, head to rootsmagic.com. See why professionals and beginners alike choose Roots Magic at rootsmagic.com. Okay, here in the mailbox, I have an email from Maria Northcote out in Australia. She writes, I have written to you before to say thanks for your podcast, but here I am doing it again. I love your podcast and am gradually listening to all of them. There are so many wonderful gems in your podcast. They are very inspiring, practical, and fun. Oh, thank you very much, Maria. I appreciate that. She said, recently I heard some of your podcasts about blogging. Although I've created other blogs in the past, I hadn't considered creating a blog to record my family history research, but now I've been inspired by you to do this. I think I'll use the blog as a place to record as many family history stories as I can. My mom, 73 years old, has a fantastic memory, and she often tells me about lots of those interesting stories, adding to the ones I can remember being told by my grandparents in years gone by. So here is my newly born blog. It's called Wishful Linking Family History. You can find it at wishful-linking-family-history.blogspot.com. She says, with my first story called Love in the Graveyard about my paternal grandparents. And she says, also, while creating this blog, I decided to create a photo collage of some of my ancestors. I found this great little free program called Shapes that allows you to create a collage like the one on my first post on my blog. As you would say, I think it's a gem. You can find them at shapecollage.com. It's easy to download, free and easy to use, and with quite a few options to experiment with. All the best to you in your research, and thanks again from over here in Australia, Maria Northcote. Well, thank you, Maria. That is terrific. And I love the collage that you made. I am so glad that you included that information about how to do it, because I know once people see the collage that you created there on your blog, they're gonna want to give it a try themselves as well. The Wishful Linking History blog is just lovely, and she's got some additional posts since she did her first one. And I love the fact, Maria, that you are including so many vintage photographs from your family history collection. Boy, it just brings it alive, doesn't it, as you're telling the stories. So I highly encourage all of you, if you've been looking for some inspiration to get started yourself, go check out Maria's blog, and I think you'll find some. And somebody else who has also taken up family history blogging is Connie Williams. She sent me a note and she says, I've listened several times to your blogging series of podcasts on family history, Genealogy Made Easy, and okay, I'm convinced. I have finally taken the plunge. So you can find Connie's new genealogy blog at constanceu.blogspot.com. And when you get there, it's called Constant Comments, which I think is an adorable name. So check that out. And again, Constance is including old photographs, which just makes each of those posts pop. And I think it really will catch the attention of folks who are coming to read. It looks like her most recent post here is April 23rd, Play Ball. And there's a great old picture of a team back from 1905 to 1907. She says her grandfather is in the middle row, second from the right. Very cool. Love to see you guys out there blogging. And Shal Talbot wrote in recently. She says, thank you for answering some of my past questions. Now I have another. I was recently researching a great-great-great-grandmother on Ancestry. I'm having trouble and used her husband and one of her children to try to find her. Ancestry identified some family trees that might link with my relative, but the data is incorrectly listing another lady as the parent instead of the great-great-great-grandmother that I believe it should be. The census data has identified this lady as a cousin. How do you handle discrepancies that don't match? Do you contact them and point out the problem, or do you just leave it alone? I may be the one that is wrong, but I don't think so. Thanks for your advice, Shell Talbot. Well, Shell, I think this is a great question because I think people probably face this on a fairly regular basis. And that is, what do you do when you head into Ancestry and you're looking at family trees and you find one that, of course, is a very close match, and then all of a sudden there's somebody there it's completely wrong? Well, the thing I would do is, first of all, just double check and make sure that you have at least one good, solid primary source for the information that proves, like in this case, that she is the right woman to be there as the mother and the wife. If you can get two primary sources, all the better. And then what you might want to do is go ahead and contact the user, the person that posted that family tree online at Ancestry, and just offer in a friendly, helpful way to say, hey, I know we share a lot of ancestors here. I wanted to make you aware of my tree. And by the way, you did notice that there was some discrepancy and that you were willing to share your primary sources that seemed to prove the case for the person that you ended up with, and would they be willing to share their primary sources with you so that you could take a look and maybe further determine which one might be the correct person to have in that spot. So kind of as a collaborative type of an option. My guess is they may not have primary sources, particularly if they copied that out of some other material that wasn't correct to begin with, which happens a lot, unfortunately, online. So, personally, I don't get into a lot of debate with people because I think, it's nice if it can get corrected because then it doesn't send somebody else on a wild goose chase if they come across that tree later. But sometimes you cannot shake people from their beliefs. In fact, I was talking with a gal named Suzanne at my genealogy society here at our last meeting, and she was saying that she had debated for years with another family about the fact that these brothers way back when were not related. And they were convinced that they were all related and that everybody was part of the same family. And she was one of the first people to ever order and pay for and get a DNA test. And boy, it was very expensive back then when she did it, but proved without a doubt, talk about a primary source, that those three men were not related. They were not brothers. And therefore, their family trees were not connected. And that was what it took to convince those people. If you want to go down that path, I guess you can. In the end, I think what we're all really striving for is a solid and reliable family tree to hand down to our descendants. We can't change everybody else's opinions, but certainly you could offer to try to work together on it. And if they don't take you up on it, well, you tried. So, but yeah, definitely double check and make sure that you have hopefully at least two primary sources to back up your end of it as well. You may find in going back and kind of looking back over them that maybe you did overlook something and that could have been an error on your end. So if nothing else, it may have just alerted you to an area that needs a little bit more digging. So thanks so much for writing, Shal. Great question.
Profile America, Monday, May 3rd. A radical new building began to take shape in Chicago this month in 1884. At 10 stories high, it was destined to be America's first skyscraper. The building was designed by engineer William Jenney. His design would literally change the shape of the nation's cities. Jenney's design was a building using a metal frame for support, with walls hung like curtains on the frame. Previously, the walls supported the building, limiting the height that could be safely reached. Soon, skyscrapers using Jenney's concept sprang up around the country and today dominate city skylines. Each year, the building construction industry in the U.S. erects nearly $263 billion worth of non-residential buildings. You can find these and more facts about America from the U.S. Census Bureau online at census.gov.
In this gem, we are going to explore your ancestors' criminal past with Ron Ahrens, author of the new book, Wanted, U.S. Criminal Records. You'll remember Ron from an interview that we did about a year or so ago about his book that covered his own criminal research called The Jews of Sing Sing. Well, the other day I got a chance to catch up with Ron in a local English pub, and we chatted about his book and how you can find criminal records on the black sheep in your family. We're here in a English pub talking about criminal records. In fact, somebody just sent me an email about the history of English pubs and the things about being on the wagon and that court was taking place in pubs back in Old England. And oftentimes people were carted off directly to jail from there. But we're talking about U.S. criminal records. And I am here with Ron Ahrens, who has written U.S. Criminal Records, Sources and Research Methodology. Welcome back to the show, Ron.
Thank you, Lisa.
This book is really, I've never quite seen anything like it before. You have compiled a truly comprehensive list of the types of criminal records that are available. And that's kind of the starting place I wanted to start right out of the gate, which is to talk about the types of records that are out there. Because as I was going through the list in the beginning of the book, I started thinking to myself, oh my gosh, oh yeah, I guess there would be that. Oh, there would be that. There's a wide range, just like with any other collection. And they come from different areas. So run down the list. What are we talking about when we're talking about criminal records?
Sure, there are, in the book I list 7 different types of records. I list prison records, criminal court records, parole records, pardon records, execution information, and the last 2 categories are investigative reports like the FBI and more locally police reports.
And I imagine that in each of those subcategories there's a lot of variation in terms of what's available and how you access it. Now, one of the things I noted when reading your book was that it sounds like a lot of this is still done in person. Now, you have tracked down an awful lot of criminal records. Was that your experience?
In fact, most of the records in the book and most of the records that I've played with are in repositories and not online at this time. So there's a wealth of possibilities for these records to go online, but it's going to take some time given the volume of records that are out there, and there are thousands of records out there.
And that brings me to the topic of incarceration rates. What percentage are we talking about? Could this really somehow fall somewhere within each of our family trees?
So I think, let me paraphrase your question. What is the likelihood that any person would have a black sheep in their family?
Yes.
And I will argue that the odds are very high. Statistics today in the United States show that 1% of American adults are incarcerated. So that's over 2.2 million Americans. So going back in time, I'm not quite sure how that rate has changed, but there have been people living in the United States for how many years? 350 years? 250 years? So we're talking millions and millions of criminals who were incarcerated, millions of other people who were at least in the court system, had arrests, but maybe didn't serve time. So we're talking about tens, if not hundreds of millions of criminals that one could research. So I will argue that the probability that any one of us having a black sheep in his or her family is extremely high. And I'm blessed or cursed, depending on your perspective, that I have many interesting characters in my past.
That's true. And in fact, a couple of years ago, a cousin of mine who I've met online and we stay in touch and do a lot of research together, she tracked down a great uncle's prison records. Fascinating. I had no idea. And they really did have a wealth of information. He fell within a time frame where she could get actual public data. But let's talk about that, because she was looking at Oklahoma. And I know that, of course, we have 50 states to deal with. I know you don't go out into the other U.S. territories, but talking within the 50 states, which states come to mind as the ones that seem to really be open and have lots of opportunity to locate criminal types of records that you're talking about here in the book?
Okay, I'm slightly biased in answering your question. Since I'm from New York, my great-grandfather who served time in Sing Sing in New York, I didn't serve in prison. I spent many weeks at the New York State Archives in Albany, and they have a wealth of records for the New York State Correctional Facilities system. So New York, where many immigrants came to from Western Europe and Eastern Europe, one would expect there to be lots of criminals in the New York area, and there were certainly lots of criminals incarcerated in New York State. And that's where I have much of my experience. To answer your question slightly differently, certainly in the major urban metropolitan areas, you'd expect probably a higher incidence of crime. So Chicago, Los Angeles, Detroit, anywhere there's a really large city. So I've played with some Illinois records for what happened in Chicago and people winding up at Joliet Prison. So I also have spent some time with California records, and I'll be doing more of that shortly. So where there are big urban metropolitan areas, you'd expect more people, more crime. So that's where you'd find more instances of criminal records.
Have you come across any states where it just seemed like a big dead end? They are either non-existent, or they're difficult to track down, or once you track them down, no access, they're totally private?
Really, no. There are criminal records for all states.
That's encouraging.
But those of you who have black sheep in your family, it's very encouraging. There are criminal records galore, regardless of which state we're talking about. Now, some states on the West Coast that became states later than states on the East Coast, they may have fewer, but I don't know if that's necessarily the case either. All states share in the wealth of having criminals.
Share in the wealth of having criminals. Okay. If you're going to go in person, now your book is terrific because, like you said, so much of this is not online. So you're going to go there in person. Talk about, from these different record types, which ones would you go for first? Obviously, there's always a limited amount of time to work. So what do we head for first?
Great question. Even before you get to these records, there's two things I'd highly recommend to do. First is to query your family to see what the family will give up in terms of information. Many families don't want to talk about this at all. We'll get to that in a minute. But for those families who are open and interested in talking about this, I would collect as much data as possible, even if it's incorrect. If there are kernels of truth in the data that you collect, you run and you explore every kernel that you receive to see which pans out and which does not, and go from there. Before you get to criminal records, the other place to examine is newspapers. And there are plenty of newspapers. Ancestry.com has newspapers. ProQuest has newspapers. Local libraries have newspapers in either hard copy format or a microfilm. More newspapers are becoming online. Newspaperarchives.com, newsbank.com. There are many places to look for newspapers online and offline. And if you can find an article about either the incident itself, the crime, or a trial, or the incarceration, then you can narrow down the location and, as important, the time frame. So once you get the location and the time frame, then you can go looking for these other types of records, which are really difficult to go through unless you can narrow down those two things. In my own case, I knew that my great-grandfather was behind bars, or I knew someone by the same name was behind bars at Sing Sing. I didn't know that my great-grandfather was there, and I had to track it down. So I actually had in mind to scour the Sing Sing admissions records at the New York State Archives in Albany, and I narrowed it down to a 5-year time frame. I gave myself 1 day. If I could not find it in 1 day, I would have, arguably I should have given up. But in 1 hour, I found the record for my great-grandfather, and that led to a bunch of other information.
Did you find a newspaper article about his situation?
Not about the incarceration, but I definitely found information about my great-grandfather in several newspapers. I must have collected 5 or 6 different newspaper articles, many from the same newspaper. Fortunately, this was in New York, so there were many newspapers in New York, and some of those newspapers are online. I went with my aunt one day to New York Public Library into the periodicals and newspaper room, and we had a field day. We had so much fun looking for these articles, and once again, if you can narrow it down to a specific time frame and you know location, you can really have a heyday.
You bet. you went into the archives, and tell us again the type of record collection that you were focused on trying to look for first.
So initially, I looked for records for Sing Sing, and the admissions records for Sing Sing Prison are held at the New York State Archives.
Those are the prison records.
Those are the prison records. So you asked a loaded question up front. So as it turns out, there are many different types of prison records. So, for example, just for Sing Sing, unfortunately, they do not have the inmate case files. Those were destroyed years ago. But they do have inmate registers for Sing Sing. And for those criminals who were lucky enough to be put on death row for the electric chair, there are a special set of inmate case files for inmates scheduled to be electrocuted. And those files are amazing. Some of those files include a visitor list. They have the last meal requested before going to the electric chair. They have letters from family members. Photographs. Amazing stuff.
Okay, now I know what's popping into my head, which is maybe popping into the head of the listener. Is there a privacy rule around these records, just like there might be with the census?
Excellent question, and the answer is definitely yes, but I can't tell you what that is. It varies by repository, it varies by record type, so you really have to, if you can guess where the right repository might be that might have the records you're looking for, you should contact them to see what kind of privacy restrictions there are. And in some cases in my book, I do talk about that, but that was some additional information that took up space, so I didn't dwell on that as much. But you should contact the repository and see what specific requirements there are. And I'll just tell you from researching other criminals that dealing with government agencies, the federal government agencies, to look for a particular record. I can think of looking for Meyer Lansky's immigration record. Different government agencies would give me a different answer as to whether or not I could access it to privacy restrictions, the same exact record. Some would say yes, some would say no. So it's absolutely mind-boggling, and it'll drive you crazy try to establish what really a general rule for this. There is no general rule.
It sounds like you really want to get the answer from the person who holds the key to the drawer they have to open, because that's in the bottom line who's going to make the call about who gives you access.
Yes and no. Sometimes people don't even know what they have. So I researched for my first book, The Jews of Sing Sing, a character named Irving Wexler, who is, I think, the only criminal in American history to serve time in Sing Sing, Leavenworth, and Alcatraz. He actually died in Alcatraz.
Wow.
And the Alcatraz inmate files are held at the National Archives in San Bruno here in Northern California. Unfortunately, this character, Irving Wexler, is not on the list of Alcatraz inmates. And I think even today, even though I've proven to them beyond a shadow of a doubt that he was in Alcatraz, he died in Alcatraz, he's not on the list of inmates at that penitentiary. So, I argued with the archivist at the National Archives that he should be on the list because I had his death certificate from the state of California showing he died in Alcatraz. I had a New York Times article showing that this criminal died in Alcatraz, and this person still insisted, no, he couldn't possibly be in Alcatraz because he's not on the list. So I actually found another set of records in National Archives in College Park, Maryland, under what's called the Notorious Offenders Series. There's a limited number of really big-name gangsters who have special files at the National Archives on the East Coast. So I got that file and made a copy and donated that to National Archives on the West Coast. So now they can know that this person really did serve time in Alcatraz. So the keeper of the key does not necessarily know what's going on either. So
and hopefully he's on the list now.
A lesson learned is not to take no necessarily as the answer. Never give up. Never take no as necessarily the right answer.
Very good advice. Now, of course, the other record type that kind of jumps out at me as being intriguing is the investigative records. You talked about FBI records. Tell us a little bit about those.
Right. The FBI has an extraordinary collection of more of the famous or productive, successful, or maybe not successful criminals, and many of those files are very easily downloadable from the FBI website, which is fbi.gov. They have, under the Freedom of Information portion of their website, lists of many different gangsters. I know Bugsy Siegel's files are directly downloadable from the FBI website. When I was researching the life of Meyer Lansky, his name was listed on the website, showing that they had a file for him, but those files were not downloadable, so I had to file a Freedom of Information Act form G639, which is, I don't know if G is for government or for gangster, but you have to fill that out, send it into Washington, D.C., and they will get back to you. And if it's a really large file, I might actually charge a fair amount of money for the photocopy, and sometimes you might be able to even get it on CD and save some of the copying costs and save a couple of trees as well.
Great idea.
Another record that I went after was an alien file for a famous criminal, and I filed under the Freedom of Information Act, which I had to go through the National Archives in New York, which ultimately contacted the National Record Center in Lee's Summit, Missouri, which got back to New York, which got back to me and said they had the file. And it took 2 years to get this file, but it was worth the wait because the file wound up being 5,500 pages long with a wealth of information.
Isn't that something? Oh my gosh. Well, I mean, we could go on and on about all the different types of records there are. I'm sure you have a million stories, and certainly your book, Jews of Sing Sing. You give some great examples of your experience of the whole research process. So it's almost like the two could go together. You have the experience of the research itself, and then you have the indexing of the types of records that one could tap into.
I really did the books out of order, I think.
Yeah.
The first book, The Jews of Sing Sing, really is a template that shows you how to put all the pieces together. The second book, Wanted U.S. Criminal Records, shows you actually where to find the pieces. So they are very complementary, even though the first book is about Jewish criminals. The templates and the stories that I tell are demonstrative of researching any criminal, Jewish or other.
You bet. So just to recap, if somebody's listening and they've determined that maybe through a family story, they've talked to their relatives and they figured out, oh, maybe there was somebody who got into a little bit of trouble. They've gone and they've looked up the newspapers, like you say, in person as well as online. Then they have to put together a game plan of perhaps going through these. You said starting with prison records is a good place to start?
There is no set way to start. Prison records are probably as good as anything, as well as criminal court records. Those are the two I'd start with, but there are other record sets that we talk about in the book. If you can narrow down the time frame and the location, definitely start with those two sets of records, and the others will fall right after.
It's interesting. I was just watching the that new Who Do You Think You Are series, and Sarah Jessica Parker is discovering Salem witch trial ancestors, and it was interesting. They held a special court there. She was looking at some of those original records. So there may be even other types of oddball courts and jurisdictions that will pop up in your search. And certainly they should probably drop you a line and let you know, too. You've kind of become the hub of all of this criminal activity online.
I am an expert on criminal records, that's for sure.
Well, tell us, where can they find your book and your website?
So my website, where you can buy my book, Wanted U.S. Criminal Records, is simply my name, Ron Aarons, RonAarons.com. And you can buy both books at my website. And I also have some other paraphernalia, things to purchase if you're interested. I have videos on how to research criminals on my website as well.
And finally, I know that you're doing some speaking coming up. Tell us some of the locations where people might be able to hear you talk about these subjects live.
Thanks for asking. So I have several speaking engagements coming up, including at the New England Historic Genealogical Society in Boston on Monday, March 15th, I think it is. And the following day, I'll be in New York at the New York Public Library on the first floor. That's at 5:30 p.m. All my appearances are on my website at ronaarons.com.
Terrific. Well, Ron, fascinating as always. Thank you so much for joining us here on the show.
Thank you, Lisa. Happy hunting for your black sheep.
Profile America, Sunday, May 9th. Today is Mother's Day, one of the nation's most revered national observances. The idea started in 1908 with Anna Jarvis of West Virginia to honor her recently departed mother, who had voiced the hope that sometime there would be a day to commemorate all mothers. By 1911, every state observed Mother's Day, and in 1914, Congress made it a national event. There are nearly 83 million mothers across the U.S. Each year, just over 4 million women have babies. Of these, 445,000 are teenagers 15 to 19, and at the other end of the age scale, more than 7,300 are aged 45 to 54. The average age of women giving birth for the first time is 25. Profile America is beginning its 14th year as a public service of the U.S. Census Bureau.
Have you noticed some new features on Google Search? They slip them in there from time to time, and these new updates could prove to be quite useful to a genealogist searching for specific websites, ancestors, or other genealogical information. So head to google.com with me and let's take a look at what's new. Now let's say that you're interested in learning more about Ellis Island, immigration, and passenger lists. Rather than type in the address for the Ellis Island Foundation website at www.ellisisland.org, which you're probably familiar with, type ellisisland.org into the search box. Sure enough, the ellisisland.org website, of course, is the first result, but there's more here if you look a little bit further. You'll notice a variety of search results that either have the words Ellis Island and end in .org, as well as sites like Stephen Morse's site that works directly with the Ellis Island site. But scroll down further toward the bottom, you'll find a few cool things that you haven't seen before. First off, Google provides results on your search words that come directly from your social circle. So what does that mean? Well, to create the My Social Circle of connections, Google uses direct connections from your Google Chat buddies and contacts, direct connections from links listed on your Google profile, such as Twitter and Friend Feed, and secondary connections that are publicly associated with your direct connections. Pretty interesting how much they know about a person, huh? In addition to web pages from your social circle, posts from your Google Reader subscriptions may also appear in your social search results. And in this case, that looks like what I'm coming up with here. But even newer is the Pages Similar To feature just below the results from your social circle. Here, Google has given you a handy list of websites very similar to the one that you searched for. Think of how convenient this is, particularly for topics that you're researching but aren't that familiar with. Or try typing in a favorite website that focuses in on a particular family that you're researching, and then scroll down here to the bottom and see the other sites that Google recommends that may be very similar to that site that you found so helpful. This could really open the doors to expanding your search in a very results-oriented way. This is also another reason why blogging about your family history can be such a great strategy for connecting with others who may have information about your family. All the other researchers out there are doing Google searches too, and you may just pop up in their similar to list. In addition to searching a particular URL address like ellisisland.org, you can also search for terms such as Ellis Island immigration. When you do that, and you scroll to the bottom of the results, you may not find the Pages Similar To results list, but chances are you will see a Searches Related To list, which is very similar. Here, Google is giving you some suggested searches that might also retrieve the results that you're looking for. And again, pretty handy, particularly for those topics that you're not that familiar with. Just click on one of the searches and it takes you directly to those results. And right above the Searches Related To list, you'll find timeline results for your search criteria. The timeline is very cool, and you should definitely check it out. You'll find a video that walks you through the Google News archive and timeline in the Genealogy Gems YouTube channel at youtube.com/user/genealogygems. And be sure and click that subscribe button while you're there to get all my videos as they're published. The news archive and the timeline are fantastic, so please don't miss that. And finally, if you're impatient like I can be when I'm researching, here's a quick and dirty way to find other websites related to the one that you're interested in. Just go to google.com. In the search box, type related:ellisisland.org. Click search. And there you go. Lots of great results that are closely related to the content found on the Ellis Island website. So next time you Google, remember to scroll your way to the bottom and into more useful results. Happy Googling! Thanks so much for joining me for this episode number 88 of the Genealogy Gems podcast. My special thanks to author and lecturer Ron Ahrens for joining me here on the show today. And if you'd like more information about Ron and his books, I will have links for you in the show notes for this episode. Again, just head to the website, genealogygems.com, click on the word podcast in the left-hand menu, and navigate your way to episode number 88. Also, want to remind you that my new DVD for the PC called Google Earth for Genealogy is available. You can find it at my website at genealogygems.com or at googleforgenealogy.com. I guarantee you're going to be pretty amazed at what you can do with the free Google Earth program. I also plan on publishing a video in the next few days or so that shows you on the computer screen everything that we talked about in our Google Gem today about the new Google search features. That'll be a free video, so be sure and subscribe to the free Genealogy Gems YouTube channel at youtube.com/user/genealogygems. Or download the Genealogy Gems toolbar, which has a little TV button on it, which will hop you right over to the YouTube channel with just one click. I have a brand new banner for the toolbar that I'll post in the show notes and on the homepage of the Genealogy Gems website so that you can just click that banner and it'll take you right to where you can download the free toolbar to your internet browser. It really is the easiest way to listen to the show and to keep up with all the gems we're putting together for you. If you have any questions or comments, you can email me at genealogygemspodcast@gmail.com or call the voicemail line 925-272-4021. And finally, have you noticed we have a little bit of different music on today's show? Well, those of you on Facebook probably know what that music is. As you may recall, if you've been a long-time listener of the show, maybe a year ago, we came across an old audio tape that was done back in the 1960s by my husband's grandparents. And Grandpa was playing the violin and Grandma was playing the piano. And there was a lot of old music on it, and I was playing one song each week. We were kind of playing Name That Tune, and several wonderful listeners out there let me know the names of some of those songs. And of course, most of them hailed back to the 1910s, 1920s, 30s, because both Grandma and Grandpa had played in orchestras in the silent movies in the various theaters. And that's indeed how they met. There was one song in particular that I really, really liked, and it was identified by a wonderful listener. It was called I'll See You in My Dreams. And it prompted me to take on a hobby that I have thought about for years and never done. And actually, the hobby is prompted because I went and I checked the title of that song on YouTube, and I found that it did hail back to about the 1920s or so. And there were a couple of different renditions of it. And I noticed that quite often the song was actually played on the ukulele. And I have always wanted to know, I don't know why, I have always wanted to know how to play the ukulele. So I did a little bit of research, actually went onto eBay and put in an eBay favorite search for I'll See You in My Dreams plus ukulele. And sure enough, I found ukulele music for I'll See You in My Dreams. And in fact, the entire book of music I got is the collection for the ukulele by Cliff Edwards, who was known very affectionately back in those days as Ukulele Ike. Well, anyway, I've been practicing, and those of you on Facebook, I know, you've seen me say, oh, I can't write anymore, I can't record anymore, I just need to sit down and play my ukulele. And it has been a wonderful kind of little break for me during the day. I've enjoyed doing it. So yes, the music that you've been hearing in our transitions between the various segments today, and that we're going to lead out with today, is me playing the ukulele. So that is my tribute to Grandpa and Grandma Cook. I'll see you in my dreams. Thanks so much for listening, friend. I'll talk to you soon.